for joining today. This is one of our regular Friday customized employment conversations, or CE conversations as we call them. And today's topic is on PASS as a resource in post-pandemic planning. So I'm Janet Stevely. I'm a consultant with Griffin-Hammis. And you know, one of my favorite things I do is help people with PASS plans, because it's just a really cool resource for people that can help people get funding that they need for things related to their employment goals. And so it's just fun. You know, it's kind of like writing little grants for people and getting them things that they need. And it's a cool feeling when people get those things. So I wanted to start by just talking a little bit about what PASS is, who's a good candidate for PASS, kind of how it works for different people, and then just open it up for some discussion around PASS, because I'm assuming maybe you joined because you're probably working with some people who might need some additional resources. So in terms of what is PASS, PASS is an SSI work incentive, a supplemental security income work incentive. So SSI is one of the programs through the Social Security Administration that helps people who are elderly, disabled, or blind, who also have financial need. They have limited income and resources. So, and what it does is it allows people to set aside income or resources to use towards a vocational goal. And by doing that, it can either increase their SSI, or it can make someone eligible for SSI who wasn't before. And I'll talk through a little bit more about how that works. So the goal of PASS is for people to become more self-supporting. And what Social Security means by that is that as a result of the PASS, a result of going through that plan, that the person would be less dependent on Social Security benefits. So Social Security is going to save money eventually by helping people get to work so that they're paying less benefits down the road. And that, you know, that helps everybody. It helps the person who's getting the work, and it helps the, Social Security in terms of, not spending as much money and those benefits being able to go to somebody else. I will tell you that PASS is a very, very, very underutilized resource. It's really kind of amazing when you think about, numbers of Social Security beneficiaries out there and people who could potentially use this. There's a very small number. In fact, 480 people nationally last year that used PASS. And we'll kind of talk about that a little bit towards the end. But why I think it's important right now is because of the current pandemic, we're just finding that we need to be even more creative as we're trying to get people back to work. And, some people maybe aren't even really attempting to go, really attempting to go back to work right now. But some people are. And, some people want to get back to work right now. And as we all know, things are a little different. And businesses might be in a different position. They may be, furloughing people. They might not be running at full board. So it's kind of a weird time for employment specialists and job developers. But even when the economy is good, with customized employment, we've always wanted to use economic development strategies, meaning that when we're proposing employment to an employer, that we know it has to work for the individual job seeker, right? It has to meet their interest and their skills and conditions of employment, but it also needs to help the business, because if businesses aren't, if they're not doing well, if they're not generating income, they're not hiring anybody. So some of the strategies that we're talking about are economic development strategies that really promote win-win, that really helps the business as well as the job seeker. Now, many of us, if we haven't already, I think we're going to start seeing tight budgets. A lot of people aren't working. That means less people are paying taxes. And as state budgets decrease, things that get hit are often services to individuals, and which could include, some Medicaid funding or state funding that we're using to support people. So alternate funding streams might be more important than ever right now. When I talk about some of the strategies, some of those economic development strategies that we know with customized employment, we're always negotiating jobs in some way, right? And we're not looking for, just open positions and trying to fit people in job descriptions, but rather we're looking at employer needs and how people might help them fill those needs. But there's a few strategies in particular that sometimes require additional resources. And it's not to say people might not be able to get these resources from VR or from other kind of more typical funding streams, but sometimes it's helpful to have that additional funding. And some of those strategies are first of all, what we call resource ownership, which again, it's a negotiated job, but with a little twist. And that twist is that the person is bringing something to the business that helps that business so that they can afford to pay that person to be an employee, right? So here's a couple examples. There's a gal in Utah, Chelsea, who she was really good with kids and really good with technology, and they'd set her up on a work experience teaching kids in school how to use iPads. And at a point, everybody was going great. They loved it. The school loved it. Chelsea loved it. So when they proposed, why don't you consider hiring her X number of hours a week to work with, kids on iPads? They said, well, it's not in the budget. It's not really even the hiring her. It's like we don't have the money to purchase the iPads. So, so as a result of resource ownership, Chelsea was able to purchase a number of iPads, and then it allowed the school district to hire her to do that job. Similarly, another fellow in Minnesota named Scott was working part-time and wanted to increase his hours at a restaurant that he worked at. And the owners loved him and, wanted to give him more hours, but they just couldn't afford to. So as they started negotiating more about his job and increasing hours, what came out of the discussion was that one of the things the restaurant was doing was buying desserts from other sources, right? So there's not much of a markup on them. But they said, if we did our own desserts, there would be more of a markup that would create more income that would allow us to give Scott more hours. And the long and short of that is that Scott ended up buying an ice cream machine. So with resource ownership, it's the individual that owns those assets that are coming to it. And in this case, the ice cream machine allowed the business, it generated more income for the business that allowed them to increase his hours. Now, in that case, they actually did some cool stuff where they branded it as Scott's Ice Cream and allowed him to kind of sell it as a small business on the side. So that's resource ownership. It's one of the strategies that we've been promoting, and especially, again, during this post-pandemic stage when we really need to get creative. We've also done a lot of work around microenterprise or helping people start small businesses. And this is, kind of in this day and time when, typical employment might be a little trickier than normal. Starting small businesses might open up opportunities for people. This is Talena, you see here, who actually she operated a cookie company for a long time. She sold cookies at the farmer's market, but her business was doing pretty badly. She wasn't making a lot of money. She loved the business part of it, but her cookies weren't exceptional. So we helped her kind of rework her business into a gourmet dog biscuit company, which used all the same skills that she had with the cookie because she liked to bake, right? So it kept her baking, and it kept her at the farmer's market, which she really liked. Plus, she was doing better business, so she got more interaction. In addition to microenterprise, there's another strategy that we use that's called a business within a business. And it is a microenterprise, but with a twist, in the sense that the business operates within another host business. And having the two businesses co-located, it helps both business in terms of, that they would tend to serve a similar customer base. Like, for instance, a group approached a group working with somebody who really was interested in coffee and in working as a barista. They approached a small kind of new undercapitalized bakery and asked them about what their customers need or ask for. And what they were told is that, oh, everybody wants espresso drinks, but, we're new and we're focused on the bakery and we don't want to get into the espresso business. But it was a perfect opportunity for a business within a business, because for this person who wanted to work as a barista, they needed some supports around money and orders and things like that. So being co-located allowed them to pay part of their income, a percentage of their income to the host business, to the bakery, and in return, the bakery helped with some of the money handling and other supports. So these are just some of the strategies that sometimes require additional resources, right? It might be equipment, it might be additional training, but oftentimes it may be above and beyond what more traditional sources of funding can provide. So when we think about who can use PASS, and I should just pause for a second here. I think everybody's muted. So if you've used PASS in the past, could you unmute yourself and let me know that? Has anyone used PASS? With the PowerPoint up, I don't see chat box or things. So if anything's coming in chat, let me know. But I'll keep talking, but I would like to hear if people have used PASS in the past. So, people who are good candidates for PASS are typically already Social Security beneficiaries and who have a vocational goal, okay? They want to go back to work and they have a pretty specific goal in mind. And that goal includes some items or services that they need to reach that goal. Now, sometimes people have a goal, they just want to get back to work and they don't really have anything they need to buy. So they might not be a good candidate for a PASS, or they might have things that are easily covered through folk rehab or through brokerages or other DD services. So the third thing is they have to have money to set aside in a PASS other than SSI. And this is an important one because while it's an SSI program, you have to have income other than SSI to save. And I'll show you how that works in a minute. And you also, to be eligible for SSI, you have to have resources under $2,000. So they look at income and resources differently. Income is money coming in any month. But if you don't spend it that month and you have it sitting around in your bank account, then it counts as a resource. So people who get SSI or Medicaid can't have resources over $2,000. So I'm thinking about this. As I'm talking, I want you to think, does this sound like anybody I know? Am I working with anybody who wants to go to work, who maybe needs some resources? Even if you don't have the answers to the questions about, SSI and resources, we can figure that out later. Let me do a really quick overview because while I said PASS is an SSI program, sometimes who benefit from it the most are people who get SSDI. Because remember I said you had to have income or resources other than SSI to set aside. So sometimes it's the folks who get SSDI or what we call Title II benefits who might be the best candidates. So the difference here is that SSDI is an insurance program. So when we work and we pay into Social Security, we're not only paying into our retirement, but we're paying into Social Security disability insurance. So that if we become disabled and can't work anymore, that there is a cash benefit that comes to people. And sometimes people receive SSDI benefits on their own work record, and sometimes it's on a parent's record, and sometimes it's on a spouse's record. But somebody had to have worked and earned enough credits to draw a benefit. With Social Security disability insurance, when you work, there's a point where you could lose your benefits, because the definition of disability for Social Security disability purposes is that not only you have a disability, but it affects your ability to work and earn a certain amount of money. So no matter how you get, and some people get small SSDI checks and some people get large SSDI checks, but whether you get it, you either get the whole thing or you don't get the whole, you don't get it at all. It's kind of an all or nothing. Whether you get it or not kind of depends on how much you're earning and what stage you're in, but it's a yes or no kind of thing. SSDI also comes with Medicare, which is medical insurance, but it doesn't provide long-term support, so it's different than Medicaid. On the flip side then, SSI, or what we call Title 16 benefits, again, is a needs-based program. So it's for people who have limited income and resources, who are also disabled, blind, or elderly over age 65. And with SSI, when people work, there's a gradual reduction in benefits. There's a formula that put in place so that there's some incentive for people to work. They don't want to just take away dollar for dollar SSI because of their earned income. So to encourage people to work, it's more gradually reduced. And with SSI, having SSI is one way to get Medicaid. And Medicaid's very important for people, both because of medical insurance, but also because it funds long-term supports like the services, like employment services and residential services and other community supports that people need. So when we think about good candidates for PASS, remember, we've got to have people that have income other than SSI. So it might mean that they have SSI, but they're also maybe working part-time and have some wages, in which case they could set it. The wages are going to decrease their SSI, right? So the more wages go up, SSI is going to go down. But if they take some of their wages and set them aside, SSI goes back up. So they basically recoup the money, but they have money to set aside. A second category of people who are good candidates are people who get SSDI or any other unearned income, but typically it's SSDI. And so those people who get SSDI only are getting more in SSDI than they would get in SSI. So SSI has a federal benefit rate each year. And so for people who have larger SSDI checks, it makes them ineligible for SSI because they have too much income. We also have people, and these are really good candidates, this third category of people who get both SSI and SSDI, and they're called concurrent beneficiaries. And they are generally really good candidates for PASS, at least in terms of the financial part, how that works. And I'll show you why as we go. So let's start with people who get SSI and wages, okay? So in this case, they're working, they're losing some of their SSI because of their wages. But if they take the countable portion of their earned income and put that in a PASS, their SSI goes back up. So they get the same amount of money, and it allows them to use the PASS money for things that they need to be successful on the job. So in this case, this is Dawn, and Dawn was hired as a filing clerk 20 hours a week. Her job was to file paperwork by phone number. It was for a company that sold cell phone packages. And what she needed to be successful on her job was some employment consultation, meaning like job coaching, but she didn't need job coaching all the time. She needed somebody to come in and help set up, and need somebody to keep in contact with the employer, and somebody to kind of direct the coworkers. And because she had a lot of difficulty with transitions from task to task, what we wrote into the PASS plan is that she would use some of her PASS money to to pay some of a coworker's wages to support her throughout the day, because it made a lot more sense for a coworker who was there on site to do that than to pay $40 an hour for the employment consultant to come in to do that. It also initially helped her pay for some transportation and some ergonomic office furniture that she needed. So that was a pretty cool one. Here's another example of SSI and wages. So this young woman, she is deaf and she has a developmental disability, and she's very interested in becoming a nail technician. And she'd gone to school, and she'd received her nail technician certificate, and she's currently working at a spa as a nail technician, part-time. But what she'd really like to do is become a full esthetician, because then she could provide a lot of other services, like waxing and waxing, hair removal, facials, that sort of thing. So she knows that by getting additional training, she will be more marketable. She could probably go to full-time. Eventually she'd like to own her own business. She's working for someone else right now. So she has a pass going currently, which is helping pay for her tuition. And she also needs some interpreting and tutoring through her program. She also at the end is going to need to get her license, which requires both a licensing fee and a travel to the larger city to take the test. So her pass was initially approved for about $8,000 or $9,000, and we just yesterday got an amendment approved, which has bumped it up to $17,000, over $17,000. So for anybody that's working, that has SSI and is working part-time, but has kind of loftier goals that would increase their earnings, by increasing their earnings, it's going to decrease their dependency on SSI. So that's something that could be approved. The second category, oops, there we go. First, let me show you how that works with wages. So the last two people I showed you were people who got SSI, but also were working part-time, so they have wages to set aside. And what that looks like, first let's look what it would look like maybe without a pass. And these aren't their exact wages, I just use this as an example. Let's say somebody was earning $1,035 a month. The way Social Security would look at that is they wouldn't count the first 20, and then they wouldn't count the next 65, and then they'd only count half of what was left. So in this case, the person has $575 of countable earned income. And that $575 would be subtracted from their SSI check, okay? So they still come out ahead. They still have the $1,035 in wages, but it's gonna really affect their SSI check. It's gonna go down because what the federal benefit rate this year is $783. So instead of getting $783, they're getting, what's that? It's less than $150 in SSI, which again, that's okay. They're still doing good. With a pass, let's say Simone Renee, who's using her pass to purchase the tuition, right, and the tutoring and interpreting. If she had $575 in countable earned income, she could set that aside in her pass. Now her countable income is 0, so her SSI check stays at $783. It's money that she either is going to lose anyway if she doesn't use it in a pass. So for her, this is just a terrific resource. And, you can understand interpreting and tutoring can take some time and some money. So that's how that works for her. If anybody has any questions, just stop me or type in the chat box and I'll pause. Wanted to go on to an example too of somebody who gets SSDI only. So again, Usually this is people who have more than the SSI amount in SSDI. So it's got to be over the federal benefit rate, 783, and really it has to be another $20 over that. So somebody's got to be earning like over $800 a month in SSDI to qualify for SSDI only. So in this case, Alan qualified under his father's claim. It's a little different benefit, but in terms of pass, it works the same. He wanted to work with plants, and we tried some things with him working at a large greenhouse in the morning. He had certain conditions of employment, which included, he needed a wheelchair accessible place. He had a severe seizure disorder, and the medication he took made him really groggy in the morning. So when we were trying some work experiences, most of the things that we found that worked for him in terms of accessibility happened early in the morning. Like they wanted people to come in and water plants early in the morning, and that just didn't work for him. So we started looking at self-employment as a potential opportunity. And, he had a lot of support. He lived in a group home that had a giant yard. And so we were looking at the idea of him starting his own business around plants. And he used the pass money that he got to purchase this greenhouse that you see in the back. He just got it that day, as well as some plants and some initial inventory and marketing assistance. Here's another example. This is also a self-employment example. This woman actually has a mental health disability, but she was very interested in gems and minerals and went to the Gem and Minerals Society. And she also had severe agoraphobia. So the idea of going to VR or somebody to ask for assistance with work was really scary for her because she just wouldn't go into public buildings. But we did a pass for her. Initially, her pass was to do some business feasibility, just to hire somebody to help her figure out if she could make money given this business idea she had. And then once we could show it was feasible, she amended the pass to be able to buy a vehicle and insurance and a phone and a laptop and some supplies she needed to get started. And you'll see her pass was approved for over $18,000, which was pretty cool. The last, so how it works with SSDI, folks, is the general calculation that they look at is they say without a pass, okay, let's say she gets $850 in SSDI, they count everything but $20. So she has $830 of countable unearned income. And for her, that income would make her ineligible for SSI because it's over the SSI federal benefit rate. But if she does a pass, and again, pass requires an application and you have to write in what your goal is and what you're going to use the money for, and it has to be approved. But if her pass is approved, she can set aside her countable unearned income amount. And because now pass doesn't count that as income anymore, it increases her SSI, and what does that say, $810 a month? That's $783 a month this year. Excuse me, that's a typo. But what it does is, okay, it lets her use all of her SSDI, or almost all of it, all but $20, to use towards work. And she recoups most of that in an SSI payment, which gives her money to live on for the year. Make sense? So there's a couple things to think about with folks that are SSDI only. One of the things is that they have to meet all the other eligibility criteria for SSI, including that $2,000 resource limit. So somebody, might seem like a good candidate, but they say, oh, but I have this, big savings account and I don't want to put that in my pass. So I have more than $2,000 in resources. So that might exclude them from using pass. The other thing is some people with large SSDI checks. Let's go back here for a second. With this example, this person is a little over the federal benefit rate, but not a lot, right? So they're probably still going to be able to live on the SSI amount. But if somebody had a $1,500 SSDI check, the same rules apply. They would put in all but $20 a month. So while there's a whole bunch of money going into the pass, they still have to be able to live on the SSI amount. So that could really kind of make it difficult for somebody to use. The other thing with people who are SSDI only, whoopsie, what did I do there? Is that because Social Security, their approval is going to be based on paying people out less in Social Security benefits down the road, right? So because SSDI is all or nothing, people have to project that they're going to earn enough to eventually put them off of SSDI. So there's sort of a higher earning limit. Like I can't just say, I get SSDI only, and I'm going to submit this pass application in my employment goal is going to end up making me $500 a month. Because at $500 a month, that's never going to put somebody off of SSDI. And so there's no way that Social Security would benefit financially by supporting this plan. The last thing is with SSDI is because somebody doesn't already receive SSI, they have to apply. And that sometimes takes additional time. And I will say just recently, well, within the last couple of years, they implemented kind of a new rule, which they used to say if somebody already qualifies for SSDI, the medical decision has already been made. So we're just going to accept that they medically qualify for SSI, and then it's just looking at do they apply now based on their income. And of course, the pass is excluding that income to make that. But what's happened in the last couple of years is some of the definitions for some disabilities have changed. So now they're actually doing a new medical review. SSI isn't just taking SSDI's word for it that they passed the medical review. Because some of the definitions have changed, they have to do a new medical review. So it could slow things down for sure. The other thing, and this is probably wouldn't apply very often, but there could be the case where somebody doesn't qualify based on the new definitions. I'm looking into that a little more right now. I think that would probably apply more to people with mental health disabilities, or I know there were some changes around the definitions on HIV. So it doesn't apply to everybody, but it might be something you need to consider. The third group of really good candidates, and this is the really good candidates one, are those who are concurrent beneficiaries, those who get SSI and SSDI. And I'll give you an example. This is Jennifer, and her goal was to work in customer service. And to do that, she needed a modified van. And, you know, VR, this is another reason where pass kind of comes in handy, is sometimes VR can't pay for the things that people need. Like they can't pay for vehicles. And it was something she really needed. She had a van, but it was really on last legs. And she had tried to get a loan for a new van, but because she was young, she didn't have any credit history, and they wouldn't loan her the money. The bank wouldn't loan her the money. Plus, she probably had limited income. So she did two things. She got herself a credit card to help establish her own credit history and started buying things and paying them on the credit card. But she also worked it out with VR. Let's say this new van that she got cost $20,000, or it wasn't brand new, but it was a used van. And VR was able to say, well, we think of that $20,000, that really $10,000 of it was modifications, and we can pay for the modifications, we just can't pay for the vehicle. So VR paid half, and then she submitted a pass application and used the pass money to pay the loan for the vehicle, for the other side of it, the vehicle side that VR couldn't pay for. So it was a pretty good little deal. Here's another example. David was also a concurrent beneficiary. He gets both SSI and SSDI. he wanted to start a vending machine business, and he needed some things. I mean, obviously he needed the vending machines, the candy machines you see here, but he also needed some longer term training and support. He was eligible for VR services through the Commission for the Blind in his state. But David is blind and has a brain injury, and in his state, there wasn't any support, at least at that time, there wasn't any long-term support funding for people with brain injuries. I mean, there was for, mental health, there was for IDD services, but he kind of fell through the cracks. So he was able to use PASS to pay for some of his own training and support. So with concurrent beneficiaries, the work's really cool. So let's say David or Jennifer that you saw received $620 a month in SSDI. Now, because their SSDI is lower than the federal benefit rate, what Social Security does is they don't count the first $20. And whoops, I see a typo there. That should say 600, not 610, but you'll get the idea. They don't count the first $20, and then they take the countable unearned amount away from their SSI. So in this case, if she gets 620 in SSDI, that would make an adjustment of, actually it should be 163. But the combined total should come out to 803, $20 more than the current SSI federal benefit rate. Excuse the typo there. So if she were to do a PASS, or he, somebody who's a concurrent beneficiary, what they would do is look at the unearned income, countable unearned income amount, and subtract that amount as their PASS contribution, which brings them down to $0 in countable earned income. So now they receive the full SSI benefit rate. So what would happen each month is, for this person, is they'd get their $620 in SSDI, and they'd get the full SSI check, but they'd have to take $610 of that and set it aside in their PASS, which still gives them $803 to live on. So they have the same amount to live on, and they have the $610 to use towards things that meet their goal. So the big advantages for concurrent beneficiaries is they already qualify for SSI. So there's no delay, there's no medical decision needed. They'll never have to live off less income because they're already living on the SSI amount, right? Or $20 more. So, it doesn't have that same issue as like people with really large SSDI checks might not be able to do it financially. They're already there. And they don't need to show that they're going to lose their SSDI. They only need to show that their SSI will be reduced. And we know based on that formula, it's kind of they take away $1 for $2 earned after the first $65. So it's pretty easy to show that they can do that. So let me just stop here for a second, see if there's any questions. And Dallas, you'll have to help me because I don't see the board. You can type in questions or unmute yourself.
So we have 3 questions. I'll just read them out in order. You may have already answered them because some of these were asked 2 minutes ago, but I'll just go ahead and read them and see. So this one is from Natalie. She wants to know, when proposing a PASS, is that through SSI or Voc Rehab?
It's through Social Security. That's a good question. So Social Security, you can take your application into a local office, but I wouldn't, actually. They have like 10 offices, regional offices set up, and they call them the PASS cadres. And they're kind of regionally based, like there's 10 around the country. And so you would want to submit it directly to your PASS specialist in your area. And if you look, I think it's in the red book, I could certainly help you find your PASS specialist. So the application goes to them and they approve it. They used to have people submitted to local offices, but it's kind of hard. They don't get that many applications, so it's hard to keep staff up on it. So they go to these regional pass specialists, and they're the people who approve it or don't approve it. But the second part of that is that if somebody's working with VR in combination, that in the application itself, it asks about if people are working with Voc Rehab or another employment network under Ticket to Work. And if so, can they contact their counselor, and has any evaluation stuff been done? So there are some questions. They do like to see that it's coordinated with their VR plan. So that's something that does come up in the application. That cover it?
Okay, yeah, another question from a different person, also named Natalie, who wants to know, could you put some of their income in an ABLE account to meet the under $2,000 criteria? And then there's a follow-up from Fontella who says, or could you do a NAFTA or trust account?
Definitely ABLE account. I'm not sure what NAFTA, North American Fair Trade Agreement. Not sure what NAFTA is, but if it was in a ABLE account or a trust, yes, that would be protected. The other thing is, let's say somebody has $3,000 in resources. They're just, a little over. They could take that additional $1,000 and put it in their pass and protect it that way if they want to use it for that. So it's kind of their own money going into their pass, but they could do that. So money that's in the pass doesn't count towards the $2,000 resource limit. And it also doesn't count for any other federally funded program. So let's say somebody's accumulating money in their pass that they're going to make a big purchase down the road. It doesn't count for SSI purposes. It doesn't count for Medicaid. It won't count for food stamps, SNAP benefits, or any housing benefits that people might get. So it's kind of its own little protected thing. But definitely, if people have resources that they don't want to use in their pass, an ABLE account would be a good way to do that. So good question. Other questions?
We have one more from Shinkwarian, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, who wants to know, how much of their own income should they save to be able to apply for a pass and save money for other stuff without affecting their SSI?
Yeah, well, each person's different because it's all based on what they have to put in, whether that's wages or whether it's unearned income, which is, again, is usually SSDI. So what they do is when you fill out the application, you say, okay, this is my goal, and these are the items and services I need, and this is how much they're going to cost. So let's use Simone Renee for a minute, the gal who's going to esthetician school, because she's fresh in my mind right now. So she said, I need X number of dollars for tuition, and I need X number of dollars total for interpreting and tutoring, and I need, the licensing fee, and I need some money for travel to Portland to take my test. So there were 4 categories and certain amounts approved in each category. Well, because in her case, she's setting aside some of her wages, it was, depending on how much she was working and earning, depends on how much she can set aside each month. But they'll let her set it aside until she reaches the total amount that she needs. And for her, because, she's paying tuition gradually as she goes, the interpreting's happening gradually as she goes. She doesn't need the testing stuff yet because she's not there yet. So it's kind of working for her. But COVID kind of put a wrench in things for her. Her whole courses have gone online, and, it's changed, the tutoring and interpreting. So we just did this amendment, and you can do this. You can go back and ask the pass specialist to approve additional funds or to be able to shift funds from one category to another. So it's kind of flexible. I mean, you try to do a good job of projecting what you need up front so you don't have to go back and forth a lot. But, it's life. Things change. People typically will need to amend their passes as they go. But in Renee's case, because she got furloughed from work for a while because of COVID, she didn't have money going into her pass at that time because she didn't have any wages. So we're kind of playing a little catch up now and having to kind of figure out. Now, had she applied for unemployment insurance during that time, she could have been setting aside her unemployment insurance and still getting her SSI to live on. So that's another form of unearned income that could be set aside in a pass. Okay. If it didn't answer your question, let me know. Do a little, go ahead and unmute and follow up. So these are great questions. Okay, let's see if we have anything. I just wanted to kind of sort of towards the end, until we get into a discussion here, to let you know that there are 7.9 million people in the U.S. receiving SSI, or last year there was 2019 figures. 6.9 of them are SSI based on disability or blindness, and some of those are children, but we got to say, like 5.8 million are working age, are working age people. So when you think about that, and then you look at the numbers who work, including part-time work, it is, something happened there. It's a very, very small percent. Whoopsie. I made some errors in here. Sorry about that. It's a very small percentage of people that are working. When you compare that 342,000 plus to, the 6.9 million, that's a pretty small percentage. And of those who were working, only 480 people nationally used PASS. It's 0.14%. So it's very, very, very underutilized. And I just thought I'd throw out some discussion questions here. Please feel free to unmute, everybody. Just a little bit here. Has anybody used PASS or tried to use PASS in the past? That's hard to say, pass in the past. Or wants to try in the future, we'll put it that way. Anybody?
I have a few people that I have in mind. Hi, Shankar Jordan. I work for Keystone Human Services.
Okay.
I came out of mental health, but now I work for intellectual disabilities, and I have a young man who absolutely loves coffee. And I have another young man who has wanted to get into car washing, but due to working with COVID and things of that nature, it's been really hard getting into businesses to try to figure out how to get them hired. So I've been trying to link with a couple of people that's been opening their own independent businesses. I had a bookstore that just recently opened in the area that I'm trying to convince to do maybe like a coffee shop inside and have him come in because he's really good with customer service. And then the other young man, he has a lot of issues with working with other individuals. Sometimes verbally, he will say some things and it will be very uncomfortable and it's really hard to keep him in employment with other people. So getting a car wash of his own, he lives in a very residential area, like an apartment complex and stuff, but it's near like a lot of industrial areas. So if we can find maybe some supplies and stuff and set up his own little car wash, I'm thinking maybe he can make some profits off of that and grow from there. So that's just my thoughts.
Cool. So kind of some self-employment and business within a business ideas. Those are really cool. And, I think even like with the car wash, I worked with somebody at one point was really into detailing and kind of setting him up within a bigger business, like a dealership. It kind of provided some of the support that he needed, but let him kind of do his own thing too. So, and yeah, just think of the things that people might need to start those. They might need, the espresso machines. They might need all kinds of things. I know one time I worked with someone, another employment specialist, who was trying to get somebody hired to do car detailing, and they were having this conversation about what the car place needed was an additional, what do you call it? Those things that lift the cars up, whatever you call those, car lifts. And so they were kind of trying to work that out as a resource ownership kind of thing, that the person would purchase the hydraulic lift that would allow them to do some of the detailing or oil changing or whatever it was that the job was proposed. But then could also be used on other shifts for other people. So those are great. Have any of you had job seekers receive benefit counseling that said that PASS would be a resource for them? Do y'all get those? They call them benefit summary and analysis. So when you refer people to WIPA programs, sometimes they do a report and say, you know, this is what's going to happen to your benefits, and these are some work incentives you might consider. Have you ever seen those PASS come up on those? So one thing, I think one of the reasons that that PASS is really underutilized is because people don't know about it, right? It's sort of interesting when I talk to service providers about PASS, people get kind of excited, but when I talk to job seekers and families about PASS, they get really excited. And in fact, they kind of want to know why nobody's told them about it before, especially if they're a good candidate, right? If they're a concurrent beneficiary, or you know that it works well for them. So let me just throw that as a question. Do any of you in your agencies, do you talk to job candidates about potential resources like this? Or might you in the future?
Hi, yes, this is Kelly. I'm in with CID, Center for Independence of Individuals with Disabilities, and I'm a benefits counselor, WIPA, Work Incentives Planning and Assistance. Yeah.
Awesome.
So yes, so we do we do refer people to PASS when it's appropriate. Mm-hmm.
Cool. And in what kinds of outreach things do you do? What state are you in?
California.
California. All right, you got a big state. What kinds of outreach things do happen in terms of PASS?
What do you mean?
Oh, well, okay. So you're saying that, you know, in terms of in your BSAs, you address PASS if people are good candidates. Yeah. And
Right.
are there resources within California to help people with developing the PASS applications? Do you do that, or do you count on?
We do that,
Okay.
yes. We cover at the center where I work, we cover benefits planning for people in 12 counties in California. So the counties that I work with, I partner with different, you know, I have different agencies that I work with, like San Andreas Regional. And so we invite each other, you know, to different trainings. And so, in fact, that's how I initially met Willis Huey, who is our PASS cadre. He was giving a presentation at San Andreas Regional to their social workers and to parents who are rep payees for their consumers. And so we were invited to attend his training, and that's the first time that, you know, we ever met. And then I invited him to come to see me, and he spoke to our staff.
That's terrific. And you know, I think the more that you can establish a relationship with your PASS person, that you know that it just helps. And I think sometimes people submit PASS applications without ever talking to the PASS specialist. And I think it's helpful that in the early stages you connect with them and kind of tell them what, you know, what's going on, what the person's thinking about, or you know, so that they can kind of help guide it too if there's certain things that they might be looking for. Because sometimes with PASS applications, they might need some supporting documentation. They might need, like, for instance, let's say somebody's buying a vehicle, that they might need to see some cost estimates. And of course, you haven't bought the vehicle yet. And you know, if you're buying a used vehicle, it might not be there by the time the PASS gets approved. But if you provide, like, say, 3 cost estimates, they can take the average of that. Or like they might want to see a copy of a driver's license, or if you're using the money to go to school or a training program, they might want to see the scope and sequence of the course. So talking to them up front might be a really good thing. And I think that's awesome that they're you're inviting them into your agency even to talk about PASS. That's wonderful. What are other things, other thoughts about PASS or people that you might use it with? Things that it might cover. Go ahead. Oh, I thought I heard somebody talking. Okay. Just any other questions?
So I have a question. I've only ever heard of the PASS through Griffin-Hammis. I've never heard of it from VR. So that's why I asked about, whose program is it exactly? So how, I guess I'm trying to think of the process in developing this. You'd kind of probably have to have a business in mind. So are you able to just give a quick overview of, like, from application to approval to then, starting with a business?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so sometimes PASS doesn't have to be used for self-employment. It can be used for wage employment too. But if you are using it for self-employment, there are some kind of steps in there too that need to be addressed. That first of all, with your application, you'd be submitting your business plan with it. And they say there's even a note in the what they call the Program Operations Manual, or POMS, that they shouldn't deny a PASS for self-employment just because the business plan isn't done, but that the PASS specialist should work with the individual to develop the business plan. But given that said, eventually before they can fund anything, they're going to have a business plan that shows financial projections that will meet that criteria for either eliminating SSDI or decreasing SSI. So when you think about that, so you probably are working with VR, you may be working with the small business development centers too, or working through the business plan. And as you're doing that financial piece, the financial projections, and thinking about startup costs, that's probably where there's a good discussion about, what can VR cover and what might people need additional funding for. And some state VR policies around self-employment will say that VR can't be the only funder, that people have to have some other source of income or source of funding, even if that's, kind of like sweat equity that they put in themselves. So PASS might be helpful in that case. Now, I should say, in all cases, VR is required to look at comparable benefits, right? So if somebody's, can get the items and services they need through other sources, they're supposed to help people go there. And I don't know if this is a federal thing or a state thing, but I know in my state is that they don't require people to use PASS. Partly because it's kind of complicated and, and some people might not be good candidates, but while they don't require that people use it as a comparable benefit, it still is a really good comparable benefit, right? So for somebody like, let's say Jennifer, who needed the van and VR couldn't cover those costs, it really was a way to make that work for her. So once the business plan is done and the application's in, the PASS specialist, if they approve it, will minimally approve it for 18 months. And the reason that they put in a minimum is that they realize people need some time to get their business going. And it's just so they're not cutting off the PASS too soon, without really giving people a chance to get on their feet and get the business going. But the PASS could last longer depending on what you're asking for and how much money it costs. So there's no, there was, and at one time they did say PASS can only last for 3 years, but now they say it can last as long as it needs to in light of the vocational goal. So let's say if somebody was going, using PASS to go to college for a 4-year degree program, the PASS lasting 4 years or even a little longer might be justifiable. But if the goal is really just to get through a quick training program and get to work, maybe a year is more reasonable. So the timelines will vary depending on the person and their vocational goals. And then after that, with self-employment, once they approve it, the person has money going into the PASS, but you have to think about how much is going in at one time and how much can be spent out. So, like if somebody can only put $500 a month into a PASS and they're starting a business that has some large startup costs that they need to cover partially through the PASS, you need to think about the timing and when they would be able to afford to buy those things. Or an option might be to buy some of the equipment or things that they need on credit and use the PASS money to pay back the loan or pay back the, the credit card bill or whatever it might be. Does that make some sense? I don't know your name. It's ND. I see ND.
Oh, sorry. Yes, that's me. It does. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I think we're kind of at our hour. If there's any last questions, I'm glad to hang on, but I'll just say thank you for joining us today. And you guys had some really good questions. So that's great. I know if people want a copy of the PowerPoint, they're welcome to it. I'll go back and fix those errors that I found along the way. So, all righty. So any other questions? Okay, good luck. I hope you all will think about PASS and how to use PASS, and especially coming out of, or hopefully coming out of the pandemic soon. So thanks very much. Have a good day.